Okay, so now that we have created the API endpoints that we are going to fetch the data from, what we want to do is when we load into the app, we essentially want the breed list loaded so that we have the drop down for that. So in my app component, I'm going to create a function at the top here, and this is going to be named fetch data, which again is going to be equal to async, and then it's going to have a callback. And in here, we want to get all the dogs data. So if I go into API TS, and this is called fetch dogs data. So if I copy that, and then we want to await fetch dogs data. So control space. So I'm importing this from lib API, and then we're going to chain a dot then, which has a callback in here as well. So in the then, we are going to have the data, and then we want to console log the data with optional chaining dot message. So now if I save, we have that fetch data function set. I also want to add a catch block in there as well. So if I just add that in and save. So now we just need to call the fetch data function when we load the page on the initial page render. So the way to do that is with a use effect hook, so that when the component mounts, we want to fetch the data. So if I have a use effect snippet, and then I just need to import the use effect from React, and when the component mounts, we want to fetch the data. And I'll just remove this for now and then take the dependency out. So we just want an empty dependency in here saying that when it loads initially, we want to fetch the data. So now if I save and then if I inspect in my console, we now have an object being returned which has all of the dog's data in here. So now what we need to do is add some state in the app component. So I'm going to create a piece of state, so const, and I'm going to use state for this instead of Redux. So this will be named breed list, and then set breed list. And I'm initially going to set it to use state from React as null. And if I import this as well at the top from React, and now we have the breed list set. So now what I want to do is instead of console logging the data.message, I want to set the breed list to the data.message as well. I also want to create a subbreed list because as you can see here, we have subbreeds as arrays. So if I just copy this across and paste this underneath, this will be named subbreed list and set subbreed list. And this is going to be an empty array initially. I also want to do the same for the images. So this will be an empty array also. So images and set images. So this array will contain images that we fetch from the API. So it will have a key. So the key will be the length of images that we pass across. And then just finally, we want a is loading state. So const is loading and set is loading, which is going to be a boolean. So the is loading will be false. So now if I hover over, for example, the use state on is loading, as you can see here, it's already inferred the type as boolean because we have already passed in false. So you don't really need to declare a type, but you can do so boolean like so. So you can do that as well, or you could just let TypeScript infer the type. So now that I've set the breed list, I also want to set is loading to false. So set is loading to false, like so, because we now have the data, and I now need to create the loader. So I now want to add a guard clause in here. So if is loading is true, then what I want to do is return a loader component. So we will create this now. So if I go into my components folder, create a new folder in here named loader, and then I'm just going to create a file of index.tsx and also styles.ts, and I'm just going to bring in my styles. So we have a loading or loader container which has a keyframe spinner on there, and then we have some styles that we've declared here. So in my index file, I'm just going to bring in the loader functional component in here. Essentially, we want to import the loader container from /styles, and now if I save, we have a container with the spinner, and then what we need to do is import this into our app. So control spacebar and then bring in the loader from the components. And what I also want to do is if we don't have a breed list, so if no breed list is set, then all we want to do is return a p tag with the text no dogs found. So now if I save and then refresh the page, we should now be receiving the breed list as the fallback text of no dogs found is not on the page. So all we need to do now is map through this and create a dog form component and a results component. So first off, in our component, we will create a new folder named dog form, and in here a new file named index.tsx, and this time we will be receiving props, so we will do tsrfce like so, and this component will be the dog form. Now if I save, and I also want to import this in our app, so instead of dog form now as a p tag, we will import the dog form from the components folder. I also want to pass down props into our dog form, so I'll just bring them across and explain. So we will pass down the breed list, which is the use state of breed list. So essentially, when we fetch the dog's data, we want to set the breed list to the breed list and pass it down. The same with the sub-breed list, if there is any. We will set the images to the action of set images, and the same for the set is loading to the set is loading. So now if I go into my dog form, I should be getting an error saying props is an empty object, which it is. So I now need to pass down the props that I've passed across. So we are getting the breed list, the sub-breed list, set images, and set is loading. I'm just going to delete the duplicate object curly bracket. And here I want to create an interface for the props being received. And these will be the following. And I'm first off going to name all of them as any. So now if I save, the errors should go away. If I now go back into my app, we are getting an error in here, which means we need to have an enclosing / at the end. So that corrects that issue. Now, if I go back into my dog form, I want to now map out what is going to be in my dog form. So if I create parentheses and then in here add some comments. So first off, I am going to have a breed drop down. I'm also going to have a sub-breed drop down, a numbers drop down. So I'm going to go up to 50. So number drop down of 50 on there. And then I'm also going to have a button component that has search and reset on there. So the first thing to consider here is I have 3 drop downs. So what the best approach would be is to create a reusable drop down component. But first off, I'm going to create a dog form container. So this will be named dog form container. So, and then again, we need to create the corresponding styles file for this. So styles.ts, and in here, I'm going to import my styles and paste them in and rename this dog form container like so. And if I go back in here, I'm just going to import this from my styles. And then if I move these up into my form and render a p tag saying dog form like so. So now if I save all, and we need to comment this all out and save again, we now have a dog form being rendered in here with the relevant styles. So within my dog form, I want to create a new folder, and this is going to be named the Dropdown folder. So this is where I'm going to create the reusable Dropdown component. And as we do in all our folders, create a new file named index.tsx and tsrfce, because we will be receiving props. This will be named Dropdown as the component. I am then going to create an interface for this dropdown, which is named props. And I'm going to bring over the 3 props that are going to be passed down. So that is the title, children, and show error. So this dropdown will have a container, and we need to create the corresponding styles file for this. So I'll just copy that, styles.ts, and paste in the styles here. So I'll go through this. So what will happen is we will have an interface for the dropdown. So essentially, we have a drop-down container that takes in certain props. In this case, we will be having a prop of show error. So if show error is true, which is a boolean, then we want to have a red border around and a red outline around the select drop down that says this is an error essentially. We will go into this further. So what we need to do is render out the component. So within the container, I will first off want to have an H5 in here, and that will be the title that we pass down as the prop. Then we want to render the drop down container. So if you import that from the styles, I also need to import the container from the styles. And then if show error is passed down, then we need to render show error and render the error text. So please choose the breed above. So now if I save, we have a few errors that we need to address. So in my drop down container, I want to render React children. So if I wrap the drop down around, we can then pass in the children in here. And also the drop down container will receive the show error prop. So if I just copy that across into here, so it gives the red outline and the red border around if show error is true. And show error will be optional, so we will add this into the interface. So show error will be received as an optional. So what we do is we put a question mark here, and what it will be essentially is a Boolean value. The title we receive will be a string value because we are rendering a H5. And then the children will be, if we hover over children in here, at the minute it's got a parameter of any, but essentially what children is a React node. So React node like so. So now if I save, that is all rendered correctly. What we now need to do is go back into our dog form, and we have first off a breed drop down. So in here, I want to bring in the drop down component that we have just made. So it's drop down, and we need to pass in a few props in here. So if I hover over this, it says props are missing. So we've got title children missing from this, and then show error can be an optional. So title for the first drop down is going to be select a breed. I'm going to set show error to true for now, is equal to true, but we will have this hooked up to the error that we set up on the reducer. And now what we want to do is render the children. So if I create a closing drop down, and then in here, I'm just going to type in I am rendered as a child. So now if I save, as you can see here, we have a title which we have passed in. So select a breed. We have the show error as true, which then says please choose a breed above if that's true. And we also have the child or the children in here as I am rendered as a child. So now if I set this to false and save, as you can see, the error is gone. So all we need to do now in the children is render a select drop down in here. Okay, so what we want to do for the children is create a select drop down in here, and we will do this for the 3 drop downs that we have stated. So all we do is select like so. We don't need a name and ID. What I'm going to do instead is have a onChange method in here that takes in the event as a parameter. So e like so, and then we want to pass and return the e dot target dot value in like so. And what we can do is console log this first of all. So console dot log e dot target dot value. And also with this select drop down, we want to give it a value which is equal to the breed list date that we are passing down as a prop. And I also want to console log this breed list as a prop that we are receiving from the app component. So now if I save, we have a select drop down here, as you can see. And if we click on it, nothing is happening because we are console logging and we're not doing anything with the value. So if we check the breeds list, we now are getting this passed down from the app component. So now we need to render all of the keys within this list. So this is an object. So in here, I'm going to create a function called render the breed. The const render breed takes in an event like so and has a callback. And then in this render breed, I'm just going to console log e in here and also a comment saying function is working, like so. And then if I copy the render breed, and instead of the console log here, I'm going to run render breed as e target.value, and then I'm just going to put test as text in here. So now if I save, I now have an error on here which says parameter e implicitly has any type, so we need to add a type for the event. So now the e.target.value is being passed in as a string, so all we need to do in here is change this to a string, and then I want to change the e to a value, so we are passing in a value in here, and save this as value also. So now if I save, all the errors have gone. So where it now says test, I want to pass in an option, and the first option that I want to pass in is the all option. So option value is going to be all, and then that will equal select breeds. So now I have the select breeds, but that's the only option. I also want to map through the breeds list that we are getting from the props from the app.tsx. So if I create a new option in here, and this option is only going to be rendered when breeds list is true and has a length and a value. So I'm going to, in my JSX, create parentheses, so breed list. So if breed list is there, we want to do and. So what we want to do is map through the breed list, but we only want to get the keys here, which are the main breeds. So we do object.keys, and we pass in the breed list, and if that is there and is true, then we want to map, so dot map, and then we get the, for each breed in here, so we want to get the breed, and we also want to get the index as the second argument. I want to implicitly return, let me just scroll up a bit and press enter. So first off, we want to get the keys for all the breed lists, so all of the keys here. We want to see if they are there, then we want to map. For each breed, we want to get the breed and the index of that breed, so 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, and so on. We want to then render an option, so what we created here, so move this up into the return block. The value is going to be equal to the breed. We are also going to return the breed in here as well as the text, and we also, because we are mapping, we are wanting to give this a key. So the key in this case will be the index. So now if I save and check my select dropdown, as you can see now we have a list of all of the breeds in here. So now what we want to do is do something with this when we do an on change click. So if I change to bulldog, you can see here bulldog function is working. So that is this render breed function. So in this render breed function, if I comment this out, and if we go into the Redux dev tools, you can now see the initial state as all for now. What we want to do is when we change, we want to select this, and then we want to dispatch an action to the Redux store so that the value that has been changed updates within the global store state. So when we select, for example, Akita, this will then update from all to Akita. So to do this, what we need to do is we have already created the reducer actions in our reducer file. So all we need to do is get access to the dispatch hook from Redux. So const dispatch is equal to use dispatch from React Redux like so. So now we have access to the dispatch. All we need to do is dispatch an action. So dispatch, and in the dispatch we pass in the type and the payload. So type is going to be the action type that we have already created. So we're going to import this from the types/reducer. So all I need to do now is press the full stop, and then the breed is what we are going to amend or change in this case, and then the payload is going to be what we receive as the value here. So payload will be the value like so. So now if I save, and all being well, this should now dispatch in the reducer here. So if I selected Akita, we can now see the dispatch has worked and the set breed action has been dispatched to the store. So if I was to click on that, you can see here the breed has now changed to Akita. If I go into this action tab here, you can see the action that we have dispatched from the click. So in here, we dispatched the type of breed, which is the equivalent to set breed. So we dispatched action type.breed, and then the payload was the value we passed in, which is the Akita value. So now what we need to do is, it is Akita on the store, but it still is select breeds in here. So essentially what we need to do is display the value of the store onto the front end UI. So on our select, as you can see here, the value is the breeds list, but what we essentially want to do is get the value from the store. So there's a hook that we need to use called use selector. So first off, we want to get access to the store. So const dog store is equal to use selector this time from React Redux. So in here, we get access to the state. So as you can see here, state, and then in here, we want to get the state of the app. So state, passing in the state.app like so. Now, if I save, we now have access to the dog store. If I console log the dog store, and we also need to amend this error. So object is of type unknown. So if I hover over this, it's of type unknown. So we need to give the state a type, and I am going to give it a type of root state, which we defined in our reducers file. So if I go there, and if I was to go into the root state, let's see what it returns. So it returns type of store.getState. So now if I close this off, we now have access to the dog store. So what I want to do is go in my console, and then if I save all, we can now see our dog store is being logged out in the console now. So now we need to get access to the breed in here. So if I just separate this out, so I want to declare a variable. So const breed state is going to be equal to dog store, and then if I press full stop, we now have access to the dog store, and we want to render out the breed for this one. So that is dog store.breed, and I also want to optional change this. So if we have the dog store, then return the breed. So now if I copy the breed state, and instead of the breed list value now, the value is going to be the same as the breed state. So if I replace this and paste and now save, we now have the Akita being rendered, which is similar to the breed state. If I was to change this to Dane, now we can see the Dane is being set in the reducer, and in the store, another action was dispatched. So if I click on this action, we can see here that the payload was the value of Dane. So in the state, the breed has now updated to the Dane string.